The United States and Iran have actually agreed to a ceasefire. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at just how shaky this peace really is. Then, we'll break down Iran's 10-point plan, what they're demanding. After that, we'll see how both sides are spinning this as a huge win. We'll also get a sense of the view from inside Iran itself. And finally, we'll get to the real game changer, the strategic choke point that might have forced everyone's hand. The official announcement, well, it came right from former President Donald Trump on his Truth Social platform. He called for an immediate, conditional, 2-week ceasefire. His framing was, let's say, super optimistic. He even called it a big day for world peace, basically saying he thought Iran had just had enough. After weeks of escalating conflicts that had everyone, holding their breath, we get this, a stunning announcement. The United States and Iran have actually agreed to a ceasefire. But here's the thing, and this is what we're going to get into. This is an incredibly fragile, conditional peace with both sides already claiming victory, and the real tensions, well, they're far from over. Okay, let's dive right in. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at just how shaky this peace really is. Then, we'll break down Iran's 10-point plan, what they're demanding. After that, we'll see how both sides are spinning this as a huge win. We'll also get a sense of the view from inside Iran itself. And finally, we'll get to the real game changer, the strategic choke point that might have forced everyone's hand. Okay, first up, what does the ceasefire actually look like on the ground? Well, the truth is, it's messy. And right from the jump, it's been incredibly unstable. Yeah, think about this. Even as this so-called ceasefire was being announced, the fighting didn't just stop. Nope. We had reports of strikes in Lebanon and air raid sirens still going off in Israel. It's like the ink isn't even dry on the agreement, and it's already clear this is not your typical laying down the arms situation. It really signals just how precarious this all is. The official announcement, well, it came right from former President Donald Trump on his Truth Social platform. He called for an immediate, conditional, 2-week ceasefire. His framing was, let's say, super optimistic. He even called it a big day for world peace, basically saying he thought Iran had just had enough. But here's a huge detail, and you really can't overstate this one. This deal has some major exceptions. Specifically, it does not include Lebanon. That means a major front in this whole thing where Israel is fighting the Iranian-backed Hezbollah, well, that's just set to keep going. It makes any kind of real lasting peace feel, pretty far off. All right, so let's flip over to the Iranian side of this. They didn't just agree to hit pause. No, they came back with a whole list of demands, basically their roadmap for what a permanent end to this conflict needs to look like. And they're not asking for small things here. According to their state media, we're talking a complete and permanent end to the war. They want the Strait of Hormuz reopened, they're demanding money for reconstruction, and they want a full-on commitment to lift sanctions. And, in exchange for all that, they say they'll commit to not seeking nuclear weapons. But, and this is a huge but, it's what's missing from the plan that really tells the story. There's no mention of stopping their nuclear enrichment program. Nothing about getting rid of that stockpile of 60% enriched uranium, which is a massive red line for the US. So you see the problem, right? They're saying they won't seek a weapon, but they're not offering to dismantle the machinery that gets them right to the edge. That's setting the stage for some seriously tough negotiations ahead. So you can probably guess what happened next, right? With a deal this shaky, a whole other war started immediately, a war of words. Both the US and Iran are scrambling to frame this as a massive win for their side. And wow, you can really see the two completely different stories being told here. From the US side, you have Vice President J.D. Vance saying, literally hours before the ceasefire, that the military's job was done, the objectives were met. Meanwhile, in Tehran, they're calling it a humiliating retreat for Trump. They're telling their people, look, we stood up to the most powerful nation on earth, and we're still standing. Two sides, two totally different realities. And just to show you how far they're taking this victory lap, Iran's messaging has been just incredibly defiant. Get this, their ambassador to Kuwait actually posted a doctored video. It showed Donald Trump getting off Air Force One, holding a white flag, and then kneeling on the tarmac. That's the kind of mood the regime is trying to project. Complete and total victory. Okay, so that's the government spin, but what about the actual people living in Iran? The ones who've been through the war, the protests, and this absolutely crushing economic crisis. How are they feeling? Well, for regular folks in Iran, it's a real mix of emotions. On the one hand, there is this huge, you can almost feel it, sense of relief that the immediate danger of war is over. But at the same time, there's this deep worry. because the very same regime that so many people were protesting against is now looking stronger than ever. And make no mistake, the regime is totally aware of this. Experts are saying that Iran's leaders are terrified of another popular uprising. Even while they're celebrating this victory, their biggest fear is still what might happen inside their own borders, especially after the brutal crackdown during the Masa Amini protests. And that fear is being fueled by an economy that is just in shambles. I mean, to really bring this home, listen to this. One restaurant owner in Iran told the BBC they literally can't sell anything. Why? Because people are struggling so much they don't even have money for essentials, like a new pair of shoes. That's the reality on the ground that this ceasefire doesn't fix overnight. So, what gives? What actually forced these two sides, who have been at each other's throats, to even talk? Well, the answer might be found in a tiny strip of water that happens to be one of the most important economic spots on the entire planet. The Strait of Hormuz. Think about that for a second. 1/5. 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil in the world has to pass through that narrow channel. And for more than a month, Iran basically had it shut down, which sent absolute shockwaves through the global economy and made energy prices spike everywhere. And right there, that's where the whole game changes. The thinking is that Iran's Revolutionary Guard had a huge realization. Right now, controlling the Strait of Hormuz is way more powerful, a much more lethal weapon than any nuclear bomb could be. Their ability to just turn off the top on the world's economy gave them incredible leverage. It might be the single biggest reason the US was forced to the table. So that brings us back to the big question, right? Was this really a big day for world peace? When you look at the facts, the nuclear issue is still there, Lebanon is completely left out of the deal, and both sides are telling their people they won, it starts to look less like a real step towards peace and more like a strategic timeout in a much longer fight. The world is definitely hoping for peace, but for now, this 2-week pause feels like a very, very fragile bet.